Welcome to your lesson on ecological succession. In this lesson, you'll be able to differentiate primary from secondary ecological succession. What is ecological succession? Basically, it is the process of community change over time. Scientifically, and in more details, natural or ecological succession is the natural or gradual change in the types of plant species that live in an area over time. There are two types of ecological succession. The first one is primary and the other one is, of course, secondary succession. What is primary succession? Primary succession is the development of an ecosystem in an area that has never supported life before. It begins when volcanic eruption or glacial retreat forms new barren lands. There is no soil yet. In this picture right here, you can see a volcano spitting out lava in the earth. When lava cools down, it forms a new land. On the other side, on the other picture, you can see here a glacial retreat. When glacier starts to melt over the course period of time, it forms new landforms. Soil is very important for primary succession to happen. A crucial factor to the development of soil in primary ecological succession is through organisms such as lichens and mosses. They are known as pioneer species. Pioneer species are the first species to colonize a barren land. How does this happen? Soil starts to form when lichens and forces of weather and erosion help break down rocks into smaller pieces. Remember erosion, because erosion is very important for this primary succession to happen. When lichens die, they decompose, adding small amounts of organic matter to the rock to make the first soil of that land. Eventually, simple plants like mosses and ferns can grow in this new soil. Then, when these plants such as mosses and ferns die, they add up more and more organic nutrients to the soil. As they add up more and more organic nutrients to the soil layer thickens, and eventually new species such as grasses, wildflowers, and other small plants begin to take over them. Then, again, these plants die, and they add up more nutrients to the soil, repeating the process. Eventually, as the soil layer gets thicker and thicker, plants such as shrubs and trees can now grow in that area. As trees starts to mature, animals such as small insects and birds and mammals will soon begin to move in that area. What was once a bare rock now supports a variety of life. In this picture right here shows you a transition of what was once a bare rock to a mature ecosystem. From a bare rock, lichens decompose these rocks, break this down with the help of weathering and erosion, thus providing new or the first soil of that area. That first soil will be first inhabited by mosses, herbs and weeds, and grasses as well. Eventually, through the process of erosion and seed dispersal, new plants such as shrubs and pines will soon grow in that area. As pine trees, hickories, and oak trees mature, this ecosystem will reach what we call its climax community, as shown in the last stage of this picture. What is a climax community? A climax community is a mature, stable community that is the final stage of ecological succession. In an ecosystem with a climax community, the conditions continue to be suitable for all the members around it. However, along the way, the climax communities gets to encounter threats such as forest fire, volcanic eruption, avalanche, or even deforestation. These forest fires, flood, hurricane, or simply a clearing of a forest community in agricultural purposes is known as a disturbance. A disturbance is anything that destroys the existing community. Like for example, the picture on your right shows you a forest fire that destroys the forests of Montana in 2015. Disturbances give way to what we call secondary succession. In secondary succession, organisms are destroyed, but the soil is kept safe. Succession begins again, but the primary species are now different. Grasses and herbs are now the pioneer species. Because the soil is present already, the rate of succession in secondary succession happens faster compared to the primary succession. A common example of a secondary succession is an abandoned cornfield. For the first year, only the remains of corn plants are seen. During its second year, it is evident that wild grasses have invaded the area. On its fifth year, grasses look more mature. On its 10th year, herbs, shrubs, and young trees such as pines and juniper trees have already started to grow. At the last stage of this, or after 20 years, the juniper trees and the mature trees have now developed, and slow-growing trees such as birch tree and maple trees have come in addition and will eventually become the dominant species of this area. Secondary succession starts when seeds in the soil begin to grow after a disturbance. These seeds will form eventually. Larger shrubs move in and become dominant. Eventually, fast-growing pine trees will move in, and ultimately, slow-growing trees like hardwood trees will soon become the dominant species of that area. An animation of the secondary succession is being shown in front of you right now. You can see that from the climax community, a disturbance took place. It took away all the organisms in that in that climax community. However, it left the soil untouched. So it did not destroy the soil. So eventually, the process repeats itself until such time that the community will reach its climax community. Another example is being shown here. So from a forest fire, the pioneer species starts to grow from 1 to 4 years. Eventually, after 100 years or 150 years, this area will regain its climax community. That's all for your lesson on primary and secondary succession. Good day.